Welcome to the Josh Button Podcast, where we discuss health, wellness, and outliers from society. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast. Today is episode 81. We're talking functional medicine with Dr. Brad Montagne. Is it Montagne or Montagne?
Montagne, you're halfway between the two. That was really
There
good.
we go. Dr. Brad Montagne. He has a book, Exposing Lyme and Chronic Illness. He has a great website, lots of resources, but we're talking getting to the root cause of illness, and we're not treating symptoms today. We're going to help lead some people to, hopefully, exactly what they've been looking for. Dr. Brad, thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
So first and foremost, why and how did you get into functional medicine? What is your journey? How did you end up there? Yeah, what brought you into the line of work in the first place?
My journey's pretty similar to anybody else in chronic illness. I'm laying in the hospital, no answers, no reason as to why it is. Just do this. You'll do a little bit better. And it was the first of who knows how many trips, middle of the night. I was 5 years old when that started with me. And that's when my whole journey with chronic illness happened. A couple years later, we went on a family vacation and came down with something where the world just spun around me. Extremely agile, really athletic, but I walked around like a drunken sailor with a really wide stance. And every time I turned, the whole world spun around me. That was 24/7, 365 days a year for years on that. And I learned to cook for myself. I found that if I ate different the rest of the family, it felt better. And that's where my journey started.
So was that diagnosed?
No diagnosis. That's the same thing that everybody with chronic illness has. No idea what's going on. And people just go back to the docs over and over and over and over with no cause, no reason why, no changes to stop this will just pacify the symptom. And I'm 5 years old thinking, this is nuts. But that's the exact same scenario that everybody in chronic illness gets. And the reason why that is, they don't teach chronic illness in any doctor school. No medical school teaches it. No chiropractic, no naturopathic, no homeopathic teaches chronic illness.
So are you talking you were experiencing vertigo itself, or you were just having poor health and it was in a circular
It was vertigo. It was a ton of things, absolute ton of things. The vertigo was, I got some of the worst motion sickness just all the time with things. Driving down the road, there's no way I could be in the back seat of any vehicle, a bus, forget it. Get out and about, just.
So you got a rooster as well, huh?
Yeah, we live out in the country and my wife loves chickens, so.
Yeah. I've got a flock here myself, and my little rooster gets noisy every now and then as well, especially when I'm taking ice baths.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting thing. My first experience with an ice bath was in Idaho in the middle of winter. I went up there to go skiing with a buddy. He said, hey, let's get some cross-country skis and ski up the Wood River up there. Cross-country skied up the river, and there's hot springs along the river. Mm-hmm. And you regulate the temperature by pulling rocks off the edge of the river to let how much river water comes in. You sit in that hot tub, just a natural hot spring for a while. And then you jump out in the middle of February out in the river and just hang onto the rocks and hang out in there as long as you could. And then you jump back in the hot springs, and it's like a million needles going to your skin. The experience is just amazing, absolutely amazing. That was my introduction to the ice baths.
I've heard amazing things about Idaho. I have to get up there. That's just all there is to it. For some reason, everybody that tells me about it is like, it's one of the most beautiful places I've been. There's so many different experiences that are, really going to put you in touch with nature. And, that's definitely right up my alley. So,
yeah.
All right. You had vertigo, you had these symptoms and these things that were, an affliction for how long? And
it was many years. Absolutely many years. By the time it started winding down probably somewhere in my teens. So I started 5 years old, but I still really had to manage my life extremely carefully. And I mean, you get into the same things that teens do. I didn't really start figuring out what was going on. My tonsils look like blue cheese 6 months out of the year. Great
Wow.
big huge fissures with these cultures of fungus growing in them 6 months out of the year.
So they weren't saying it was strep throat or anything like that?
My oldest brother, brought strep throat home. It's the antibiotics that you take for the strep throat is what cause all the fungal infections. And
Right.
that totally destroys the gut. And that's one of the biggest issues that causes all chronic illness is that the cures oftentimes cause a whole bunch of other things that they accept and they think, and they just never deal with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting word, cures, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They don't occur. And medical doctors are the only one who can legally use it, but they
Yeah.
can't access it. Yeah, we do a lot with Lyme disease. They do not believe you can get rid of Lyme disease. And they'll tell people flat out that. Yeah, and that's the case with virtually anything. But no other profession can use cure.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot on this podcast and the liabilities and they'll come after you and yeah, it's a whole racket and it's a mess. We definitely are familiar. So, you found out a little bit about what was going on yourself by yourself or was there somebody in your
Well,
life that
yeah, it's interesting. Going through grad school, I'm surrounded by docs. No one ever figured it out. I've got good friends. One's a top functional medicine doc in a different part of the country. Never pick anything up. They have no idea what's going on. What I do is so different that the top people who teach it have no idea what I do. We're very unique. I had to figure it myself. So I was full of fungal infections. I've had Lyme disease really bad, babesia, like fevers. I've had every, not every aspect, but I've had some of the worst aspects of chronic illness a person can have. And no one was able to figure it out and help. I figure it all out on my own. Those are the tools that we gain to be able to help other people.
yeah, experience is best. Unfortunately, most people going through something like that is the way they find these answers. So did you go traditional? Did you take a bunch of antibiotics?
When I was young, that's the way I was directed. I haven't. It's a funny thing. You asked that. A friend threatened me that if you don't go to a medical doctor, I'm going to drive up and drag you to one. So I went to one, and he says, "Oh, you got influenza when I got Lyme disease, babesia, and all this other stuff. Go take some ibuprofen," I think he said. I hadn't even taken an aspirin in like 30 years and nothing like that at all. When I left, I left, and I want nothing to do with all that stuff. I took one of the smallest doses you could have, like 250 milligrams. I got hallucinations.
Yeah. We've seen some interesting things coming about from RFK and their acetaminophen reports, right? You see anything about this?
It's huge what he's doing. I know some people that know him. I've thought it'd be a good idea to contact him and offer some stuff because he looks at research and what we do is clinical research. So there's a big difference. When you look at all the research papers that are out there, the studies from way back in the early 2000s say that at least 40% of the articles in the best peer-reviewed journals in the world have spin on it. The results are not supported by the study. That suggested that it's at least 70% way north of that in America, and it's way worse now than what it used to be. That's universal for all aspects that are going in there. The people in the nutritional industry are manipulating it. The people in natural medicine are manipulating the people in pharmacy, medicine. It's all manipulated. It's just to drive revenue.
Yeah, profits. Anybody that has major incentive to show some kind of results has probably dipped their toes in the water of manipulation in that area.
It appears to be the case because we get from research from some of the best nutritional companies in the world. We test that out clinically and find almost none of it works. And we test everybody on everything. You look at Mark, Dr. Mark Hyman's arguably the most famous, most well-known functional medicine doctor in the world. His intake for a new person is 100 tests. You can do add-ons on top of that, 100 tests, or 4.5 times that.
When you say test, are you talking about obviously well beyond the questionnaire, well beyond what the user feedback is? What kind of testing would he be putting somebody through that's
Well,
involving hundreds?
he's doing lab testing, which the accuracy of lab testing is atrociously low. Most people don't know that. Food intolerance testing, 2-3% accurate. You look at the Lyme testing that's out there. Premier Lyme lab in the world about a decade ago had on their website. Their tests were 0 to 20% accurate if you got a lab sample within the first 1 to 2 weeks of infection. Now their website just says their tests are not a diagnosis. But they did a research thing quite a while back. 72 patients, 516 blood draws, triple blood draws for every patient. They carefully labeled these vials in code so no one could tell where they were, and they sent them to the best Lyme labs in the world. Sometimes one sample went to 3 labs, sometimes all 3 samples went to 1 lab. Of the 516 lab samples that came back, no 2 results were the same. People don't realize that's the kind of accuracy that lab tests are making. They were set up by Rockefeller primarily. Rockefeller and Carnegie got together to change medicine, and they're just there they were designed to manipulate Louis Pasteur's work on the germ theory to give people a credentializing so they could sell more pharmaceuticals. They're there to address symptoms, not to find cause.
All right, so we're touching on something that has been communicated about more and more lately. And since you brought it up, Louis Pasteur's work and the falsification of records, the promotion of, well, findings that we now know just were not true, just as untrue as some of these lab results that we're getting. And I've seen some things that were crazy before I started submitting myself for any lab work. When I questioned the process, one doctor of mine made it very clear that if I test your blood at 8 in the morning versus 6 in the afternoon, it's going to be 2 totally different things, most likely. That didn't register with me. That led me down to a little bit of a wormhole of research on my own, well before I was ever in the know about how these findings, how not fraudulent, but I would say how mistaken they are, how misleading they can be, before I ever started to question the big one, which was Louis Pasteur's work and any of the narrative that is kind of keeping the establishment afloat. So where are you at on germ theory versus terrain theory in itself?
I've looked at both. I'm in the tail end of 4 decades of doing what I do. So I'm not young. This isn't theorizing. We test clinically everything as far as metabolic functions, hormone functions, gut functions, detox functions, infective issues, food intolerances. We test everybody on everything. 4.5 times the testing that Mark Hyman does. And the only reason I do that is because I'm anal about testing. It takes that degree to find out what's really going on. And you start to see patterns after a while, and you got to pay attention. So Louis Pasteur is the father of germ theory. He's the one that really developed the microscope. He spent his entire life studying germs, believing germ A caused disease A, germ B, disease B, germ C, disease C. And if you eradicated the germ, you'd eradicate the disease. He had a contemporary. They bantered back and forth. They knew each other. They shared each other's work, but that was Claude Bernard, who taught in the French universities over there about physical vitalism. And Claude Bernard's belief was it was the constitution, the integrity of the body inside that allows these microbes to grow. When Louis Pasteur got to the end of his life, he made the confession. The germ is nothing, the soil is everything, and that's where the terrain theory comes off of. When you look at these infections, and this is what sets the stage for virtually all your chronic illness, they're all opportunistic. They can only grow if the immune system's all beat up. And when you add those 2 icons, from the past, and you add onto that Hippocrates, all disease starts in the gut. Well, guess what science has done with the gut? It's really an amazing thing. When I was in grad school, they said that it was over 50% of the immune system's in the gut. Now it's 75. So that's pretty huge. When you take what's going on inside of the gut, you got a lining of the gut called microvilli. It's like sticking your fingers up. The microvilli, it increases the surface area of the gut 400 times. And that's insane. It's about 6 square feet. It goes smooth, and it's the size of a tennis court with all that. The microvilli secretes a mucus. That mucus fills the space in between the microvilli caps over the top, and that's where all our gut microbes grow. The gut flora, the microbial coating, whatever you want to call it. When you look at that in an electron microscope, the food can't touch the microvilli. All the interactions with all the microbes is the same in the soil. It's the microbes in soil that convert the nutrients into absorbable form and give those to plants. The plants give 25% of their sugars they're creating up in the leaves down to keep the microbes there, and they live in this happy harmony. We've got the same thing going inside of our gut, and the food feeds the flora, mostly the fiber that's in there. They convert all that. They bring the nutrients in the microvilli, and they get absorbed. Well, what happens with all chronic illness is some inflammatory issue starts to irritate these microvilli and they start to atrophy. And it's like you close your hand down and you just expose your knuckles. That's all that's left of the gut lining. As that happens, the space in between the cells in the gut, they're closed up with, it's like you do finger locks like this with what's called a tight junction. Those start to loosen up. As those loosen up, you get all kinds of toxicity that goes through the gut lining. The gut lining is only one cell layer thick, creates inflammatory reaction underneath the gut lining. The gut cells that line the gut, called the gut mucosal cells, they start to release some inflammatory hormones that cause the immune system to come over. The immune system tries to plug the holes. It can't do it. More toxins come down through. Those toxins are converted by some more chemicals inside those mucosal cells to expose what's called antigens. Those are the identification of whatever is there. And every cell has those. We have our own. The immune system is supposed to recognize us as ours and leave us alone, but anything that's foreign tries to go and attack that. So you have all this toxicity pouring through. As that pours through, the immune system starts to react to the toxins. The T helper cells attach to those toxins and they expose it even more to the immune system. T killer cells come down, try and engulf that, and the T killer cells are there to try and engulf microbes and kill them, but it can't do anything with toxins. We've only got 4 detox organs, and almost nobody talks about this. I never heard anybody else other than me talking about the 4 detox organs. So the T killer cells that try and eat this stuff, it doesn't do anything. And it takes up all the energy of the immune system trying to deal with all the toxicity. Then beta cells come in, they create antibodies, and those antibodies go to attack these toxins. The toxins embedded in the mucosal cells in the gut lining. It attacks those, and it blows these great big holes in the gut. You got the leaking gut from the tight junctions getting loose. And then from the top, we got electron micrograph pictures. I got somebody just put a presentation on this together before we got this call, and it'll blow holes in the top. So then there's no filter to let these things through. And these toxins are super antigens. One of them is some of the cell membranes of gram-negative bacteria called LPS, lipopolysaccharides, for people who want the $100 work. Those are super antigens that cause super radical autoimmune responses. And everywhere where those toxins go, the immune system goes to attack it. This is what causes all autoimmune issues. There's a research article in American Journal of Pathology, I think it was from '04. It says you restore the integrity that causes mucosa and you stop it, autoimmune problems. Almost nobody's looking at that, and nobody's looking at it very functionally. So if I back up a little bit, we talk about the detox organs. Detoxification happens in 2 phases. Phase 1 actually makes things more toxic, creates free radicals that run around there like chemical bullies, slamming things over over the head with a baseball bat, stealing electrons and running away, go, oh, they'll drop that and do that to the next thing they run into. Halides, and the periodic table elements, those are some of the worst ones that are out there: fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. And anything that attaches those is usually hydrocarbons, and that's why the hydrocarbons are so toxic, is that. So the phase one creates those, and the phase two does something else. It adds something to that to make them water soluble and no longer toxic, so you can excrete them. Well, the four organs we have to do the detox is the gut lining. This first one, small intestinal lining, where all your microvilli are. The colon lining, where the rest of the microvilli are. The gut flora, where all the microbes grow in between the microvilli. 3/4 of our detox system is in the gut. And everybody's looking at the liver, and they're doing liver detoxes. That's why they're not effective. And they sell a lot of product, but they don't get people well, because 3/4 of problems inside of the gut. And the liver is this catch-all. All the blood that returns the gut goes in the liver. It's a filter to filter these things out. And it's got this huge immune function to try and deal with the microbes that come through and all that. It's the last place in the body that has detox function. The immune system has zero, absolutely zero detox function. So when the liver gets overwhelmed, all this toxicity spills out globally. And that's what beats up all of the metabolic functions, all the hormonal functions, all the neurological functions, to cause all the symptoms. And this is the stage where chronic illness grows. You got a wrecked gut wall with atrophied, leaking microbial lining in there. The microbes, it's the health of the microbes that grow inside that actually keep all the pathogens in check. It's not the immune system. Candida is one of the biggest pathogens that grows in there, and it's a class that's got yeast form, fungal parasite form, and a mold form. The cell walls of all those are made of chitin. It's the same thing that's the outside shell on a shrimp, the outside shell in beetles, crickets, and all that. Chitin is impervious for the immune system to do anything. The immune system is absolutely, completely paralyzed. It cannot do a thing to chitin. So once these microbes start to grow, the immune system can't do anything. And when you look at like mold, you look at fungus, you see these fuzzy looking hair things that stick out to look pretty benign. They're not. Those are the feeding tubules. That's where they breathe and take in moisture, nutrients, and all that. When those pierce the one cell lining of the gut wall, they can break off, flow through the bloodstream, and create a new colony wherever they go in your
So
bones.
to interrupt real quick, so that's how things get transported. And let's say cancer cells or something is in building in another part of your body. It's because we can't remove it from that spot wherever the blood takes it.
Very, very, very interesting what you just said about cancer. The research shows that candida can morph into cancer. Cancer morphs into candida. And the bulk of people that die from cancer actually die from candida infections, not cancer itself. So it's important to make that clarification. The blood system, the circulatory system, becomes the highway to move these things around.
Mhm.
And then they'll take up residence wherever they go. So when you look at cancer, there's three things that set the stage for cancer to be able to grow in anybody, any tissue. Doesn't really matter what they are. Do you know what those are?
Acidosis, lack of oxygen,
Okay.
acidosis.
Okay.
And obviously, if you have leaky gut and you're not your ability to digest any of the nutrients that you're getting, and you have zero or a capability of fighting it off, I'm
It,
sure
it,
you're.
yep. So you're right. You're right. And I'm not sure if anybody's clarified those, but that's exactly it. With acidosis, you cannot carry oxygen. You can't absorb it. You can't carry it. Can't be delivered, can't be utilized. So I'll throw this story in there because it's a mind blower. A couple of years ago, my mom was 92. She got diarrhea so bad she couldn't get out of bed. Neighbors got called, paramedic. I think the husband's a paramedic and a nurse. The wife's a nurse. They checked her out, couldn't figure out what it was. They called an ambulance, said, come roll in quiet, no sirens or anything. Checked her out, couldn't figure out what it was. She could talk fine, she could breathe fine, she just couldn't get out of bed. The diarrhea wipes out all of your minerals. Anybody should know that from a history. So she goes to the hospital, they give her a diagnosis of COVID pneumonia.
Of what?
Of COVID pneumonia.
Okay.
She's breathing fine, talking fine. So they put her on respiratory issues. And I get a call days later from the hospital. They're moving her into hospice. They're, setting her up to die.
Did they put her on a ventilator?
And she'd been on a ventilator for a while, been on oxygen for a while. And when they called to tell me that, to get us okay, I didn't know I was one supposed to direct her care. She never said anything. So I asked if I could talk to the nurse. I already had a copy of her blood work, and I said, okay, you look at a couple things. Let's concentrate on just one thing here. Her calcium levels are way low. They're way low below what your things are. What are you doing for that? We're giving her Tums. That's what they always do. I said, do you guys got access to calcium citrate? I said, yeah, we do. Can you please ask the doctor to change her calcium from Tums to calcium citrate, minimum of 24 milligrams a day, and change her hospital water to distilled water? That's pretty benign. I had one brother that was just obnoxious with a doctor threatening and all that other stuff about what's going on. They had a remdesivir and the whole stupid issue. In 2 days with the changes that I gave, she was off oxygen. 2 days later, she went home. People didn't understand. What did you do?
So you had him switch from RO to still water? When you say hospital water,
RO is not healthy.
yeah, is that what you were referring to by hospital water, though?
It's city water.
City water.
It's going to be city water, and I doubt they use RO. We finally figured out what the problem with RO is a while back.
That it has
Somebody
absolutely
had,
no minerals at all?
what's that?
It doesn't have minerals. It's taking the minerals out?
No, that's not true.
What
That's
is
not
it?
true. You don't want minerals in your water. You can't absorb minerals out of your water. The only
What if you're
minerals
adding salt?
yeah, people have all kinds of crazy ideas about things because they don't understand physiology. I've been
Mhm.
studying physiology for over 40 years, and I don't know many to do. I can't count on one hand. I'll fill on my fingers of docs that I've met in every profession to study it. This is the reality. There's a genius back in Einstein's day who was a really close friend of Einstein. When Einstein came up with the theory of relativity equals mc squared, Dr. Kerry Reams, his close friend, says, okay, so what's that mean to the common man? And I get this, that Albert, he leans forward, sticks a hand on his shoulder, looks him in the eye and says, that's for you to figure out. And Kerry Reams did. It's amazing what's around all that stuff. But Kerry Reams got a medical education, different country. They wouldn't give him a license over here. So he did all kinds of other things. He became one of the best soil geniuses out there. And he taught people who taught master gardeners things that nobody ever talked about. And some of his stuff is that the way that we manage our soil or our farming, we only get maximum 2 to 3% yield off the land. With what he does, you're getting over 50%. And the sugars and things like sugars is a sign of nutrients. You measure those with a spectrometer, not something else. And the sugars in your cucumbers, my wife's dad was one of his students many years ago. He made some pickles out of the cucumbers. The bottles exploded because there's so much sugar turned to wine, and it just fermented, and it just blew the bottles up, which is an interesting thing. You wouldn't think that's a fermented process, but it was with what's going on. But Kerry Reams starts talking about water and what the highest energy of water is steam
Structured.
distilled. You don't want any minerals in water. The minerals in the water are all rock form. We can only absorb chelated, which come from plants.
So structured water.
No, not structured. That's another game somebody's playing. The only structure water has is in ice. And that's when water molecules, they lock and they make these crystals, which we see in snow and ice and all that. That's the only time the water is actually structured. All the rest of the time, you get all these things floating around in this liquid. And it's structured when it comes into a solid form, but
Gel
not.
So like a gel form from fruit, no?
So what?
So like gel form like H2O from, let's say, cucumbers or from oranges or from watermelon.
You have all kinds of other things in with the water that give it viscosity,
Huh.
but
But
it's not.
that doesn't make it structured water.
No.
Got it.
And it's something that's being promoted a whole bunch because people don't look at this stuff. But steam distilled water is what they use in nuclear fission
Mhm.
physics and all that. All your nuclear energy issues, bombs, and all that.
So
The
you
heavy water is steam distilled,
yeah,
zero minerals.
so you would promote drinking distilled water.
We drank that solely for years.
So have I. No worries. So I drink distilled water for quite a long time too, and then would run into the arguments that, oh, without minerals in your water, you're depleting your minerals, vice versa. So I would actually add salt to my distilled water. And water has become a very interesting subject matter because of how many, just like you were about to say, I think, how many people have these narratives behind the water that they want to sell: the hydrogen water, the structured water, the filtered water, the home filtration, different filtration systems, the reverse osmosis. And as much as I've studied water and as many times as I've advised somebody on what's the best route to go to avoid drinking the city water, and that's kind of the perplexing issue that most of us face, especially in the West, is that we have people that are adding chlorine and no neurotoxins to their water for the health. So avoiding that in itself was primary, I guess, concern. Then
Okay,
second,
I'll give you something where you can really stand on this.
all right,
The independent lab studies that go on as far as testing water. You look at the pour-through filters, the one that stands head and shoulders above everyone else in every independent study is zero picture, period.
is
That's it.
arrow pitcher.
Zero picture, the pour-through pictures. Berkey
It's
is toxic. They had 2 class action suits a while back.
yeah.
They
They didn't
can't get their
didn't
stuff.
didn't Berkey change up the way that they made their filters, and then because of a ban in California or something like that?
People cut the filters open, they're empty. They got aluminum plates and all these other things that go on. Aluminum reacts with the chlorine, creates toxicity issues, and you got all kinds of things that are promoted by emotion
Hmm.
and marketing that
Yeah.
have no bearing on truth whatsoever. So you look at the whole house systems that are out there. Aquasana is head and shoulders above all the rest, one of the cheapest systems that are out there. They've got these great big, huge, are pretty close to 4 foot tall carbon filters, the pre-filter or post-filter. If you're out in the country where you might have contamination from local farms, you can add a UV filter to it. Right now, their basic system's about $1,000. I don't get anything for this. I tried to get an affiliate from them, and they won't do it because I'm too small of a guy. But I'm into giving people things that work. So those are
What was the filter that you mentioned just before that? The pour through?
the pour through is zero, RO. You can pick those up at Walmart, Target, any box mart, Amazon. There's a whole bunch of different ones. The smallest one's about $20, and that's good for 2 people, 1 or 2 people. Refrigerator, you got family sizes bigger than that. Lexan plastic is not reactive like the other plastics. It's pretty darn clean. So you look at those 2 as the carbon filters that do the best job. Zero, a lot of different water treatment places started adding chloramine into it, and that stuff is super, super toxic. It takes a specialized filter to filter out the chloramine. Zero is one of the few that you get a hold of your water company if they're dumping in chloramine. It costs twice as much for that filter, but it filters it out. And I think those are like 2 micron filters. A micron is a thousandth of an inch. So 2 microns, 2 thousandths of an inch. A 16th of an inch is 63 thousandths. So a 32nd is about 31, 32 thousandths. A 64th is 15 thousandths around there. So you're talking a razor slice on a piece of wood is bigger than the pores. And those are really huge. But you look at the reverse osmosis, we were working with somebody who had a system that was like that. And we got, we test people's water systems and homes with mold and all that. Because you have to have access to be able to test everything in somebody's environment to deal with what we deal with. Because the people we see are commonly the people that have been to multiple docs over decades, oftentimes some of the best specialists in the world who have no answers whatsoever. And all the failures that they're never able to help, we get over 90% of them have to get. So we're doing something radically different. We're checking a water system. Somebody had one of those high dollar reverse osmosis, pumping out toxic water. And where the toxicity was coming from was a remineralization tank.
Mm.
The minerals they were using to run the water through these big colored balls. It looks like gumballs in a gumball machine.
Is essentially fortifying their water like they would do
Essentially,
cereal.
right, with a toxic foam that's cheap to make, but they don't understand the physiology it's talked about. In the soil, you take the soil to make a nutritious soil. It takes 5,000 water-soluble pounds of calcium per acre to make healthy soil. Now, you do the backwards math of that. High cal lime's about 1/3 lime. It takes 3 to 5 years to release that. So if it takes 5,000 pounds, we multiply that times 3 to get the 5,000 because it's only 30%, 1/3. And then we multiply that by 3 to 5, average that to 4. You're talking 15,000 pounds when you multiply it times 3 times 4. That's 60,000 pounds of high cal lime to get 5,000 pounds of elemental calcium in your soil to keep that soil highly nutritious. Nobody does that.
Is there any really healthy soil in that regard?
There's a few ways that people do that. It's the people that understand that. You can use biochar. That'll bring microbes in, and the microbes will start to convert the nutrients into water-soluble form. You've got to use nitrogen to keep that calcium floated up in the topsoil where plants grow. And there's a bunch of things to all
Planting.
that. But all this was figured out by that guy, Kerry Reams, the close friend of Albert Einstein. And he's got a couple books on it that are mind blowers. I just finished one of his books on molecular physiology. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine. My son's just been shot. The hospital says he's not going to make it. Can you pray? She was wise enough not to run to the hospital. She called everybody that knew how to pray, got that going before she went to the hospital. And it was interesting. When she shows up, she runs into one of her son's friend's mom, who instantly starts talking about me. They'd never met before, and asked if we send him a ticket, would he fly out here? And she asked me, I go, well, to me, that's a God door. And I like God doors. That's how I live. So sure, why not? Really an odd thing. We did all kinds of things that were completely contrary to what was going on. The guy got shot through the abdomen, blew up the colon, the lower part of the small intestine, and took out the internal iliac vein. He almost bled to death. If it wasn't for a smart thinking brother who just jumped on him, just put compression on where the blood was coming out, there's no way he would have made it. I'm on the airplane going out there, taking this book with me, and I sit down next to this guy, and he goes, "What are you reading?" I go, "This is molecular physiology." And he goes, "Well, that sounds like a heady subject." I just finished that book. It was just before I got that phone call. It was within the last 2 days. So I got all this fresh stuff in there and a whole different way of looking at things. And it's only when we understand how all these things interact that we get to help people, because people have all these ideas about things, but they're contrary to physiology. And that's why I brought in this story about my mom with the calcium. I gave her a form that, it's got corn and it's toxic, but at least it's absorbable and it's going to get inside and do the job. And we deal with the corn toxicity after all that stuff. And in 2 days, it made her it changed her pH so she could absorb, transfer, deliver, and utilize oxygen. And 2 days later, she goes home. And when they're sending her to death camp,
Right.
And that's not an uncommon story when you understand physiology.
Can we go back to water?
Sure.
Just before I forget about it, and since you're talking about it in those regards, and I can't help but think about Matsuro Emoto and his projects. And sure, he froze water and he labeled it, and he put words, he put intention, he did these different things to produce the results that he was producing. Indian culture, they use copper vessels to, whatever you want to call it, purify their water. They'll put water on an open table. Are these merely illustrations of that physiology? Or is there?
Essentially, they are. Just before we got on, I did a podcast with a guy in Africa, and we ended up talking about this subject too. What can my listeners do for their chronic illness? What are some things that gives them signs that something's going on? What can they do? And we talked about water. Every indigenous water supply has its own inherent problems. And when you look at these culture ideas to do that, copper is going to do something physiologically to that culturally inherent problem in the water to address that and adjust it to make it better. You look in Africa where you got cholera, diphtheria, you got all these wicked diseases in the water. There are some relief organizations that started sending over 5-gallon plastic jugs. And plastic's got its own problems, but it fixed one of the biggest problems. They go down to the river, their water supply, they fill the jugs up with water and they stick it in their front yard in the sun. A day of baking in the sun gets the water so hot it sterilizes it and it makes it safe to drink. So which is the evil of the two lessers or the worst of the two evils is, you're putting plastic in the water. You know that. And there's just plastic and heat that's going to happen. But they at least make those water jugs with a type of plastic that doesn't release chemicals to the same extent that most other plastics do. So it's resistant in that quite a bit. And you look at the devastation of all the disease-ridden places with cholera, diphtheria, and all the other diseases that are transferred with water, it's obvious that that plastic toxicity inside the water is a much better thing than anything else that they have. And you're going to find that type of a thing wherever you go. Grew up on the West Coast. I lived half my life in the Midwest, and now I'm on the East Coast right now. In the Midwest, we had one of the cleanest water supplies around. We didn't have a deep well. We had a sand pond. Sand is one of nature's best filters out there. And we had people come from 2 counties to get our water. It's the cleanest, sweetest, purest water you could find, just a sand point. Where we're at now, we're up in the Appalachians and in western North Carolina. There's no selenium in the soil up here. It's all the bedrock way down below in toxic levels. And we've got a well that hasn't worked very well, and we got cisterns too. And I built another cistern. I got about 1,400 gallons of cisterns that's fed by a spring that I've had to fuss with a little bit, but that's our water supply. We don't need to do anything with it other than a sediment filter. And with our sand point, we didn't need to. But if you go deep well, you need to do all kinds of things with those, because if it's through granite, you're picking up granite shavings and all that. If it's through clay, you're picking up viral issues and growth medium, that all kinds of nasty stuff grows in your water system that you've got to scrub your sediment filters out with vinegar to kill the viral issues going on. Vinegar is one of the best things out there, and some of the cleanest vinegar is the distilled white is all made from corn. It's all toxic. You don't want to use that.
Right.
There's 2 sources of vinegar. The best source, there's a wholesale place called Germ that they bring stuff out in trucks, and you offload your stuff on trucks, so they don't have a warehouse front for things. You order stuff and it goes across the country and it goes to drop-off zones, and you unload these trucks and then you take that home from there. They've got Maricon organic rice vinegar, some of the
Right.
cleanest, cheapest vinegar. You get in a 2-pound box. Some of the cheapest vinegar you can use that for your cleaning stuff. That's some of the best stuff to clean your filters out from your wells and things like that. If you got the clay and you're getting the slime and your filters are getting red and slimy and all that, you absolutely need to clean those out with vinegar every time you change the filter.
Yeah, so I'm pulling from limestone. I'm in South Florida. So obviously our wells aren't probably as deep as you're experiencing there in North Carolina or even as on the West Coast, and we have that limestone bedrock pretty shallow. But I do have the algae issues in my, and I got to clean the filter probably once a month just for gardening. Is that the same thing? Should I use vinegar for that? And should I worry?
The
Yeah,
interesting thing with that, the Jews out in the Judean desert that just left society, one of those groups was called the Essenes, and they just went out more of a monastic life. They studied scriptures as a group together. They had 2 meals together, and they just was a farming issue. They collected water in these caves in different places, and what they realized is algae only grows when it's exposed to light. So one of the biggest things with algae is you get the light sources out of there, cover that so light can't get to it and the algae doesn't grow.
so we use that black tubing, dark tubing. And for some reason, you can't really avoid light penetrating somewhere in the process. It's really interesting. Like it's coming out straight out of the ground, straight through the pump, and in black tubing the whole way through. Maybe there's white PVC. Maybe that I guess could be the issue there, is that the sunlight can penetrate the white PVC, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I know PEC's a big thing out there. A bigger proponent of copper lines, and
Yeah.
you just don't have problems when you do that right. And if you ran copper lines through PVC, so you soldered your joints and then you ran it through there, you'd probably avoid all that stuff.
I would totally do that, but it's a small community garden and that's a little bit pricey for what they're doing.
Yeah,
That said, what do you feel about labeling your own personal drinking water? So I've for years I've carried these bottles around and I labeled them with love, gratitude, put intentional statements on my water just for those Matsuro Emoto results, and a reminder every time I would pick it up and drink it that this is nourishing me in one way or another. And if I'm putting that intention into the actual vessel, into what I'm drinking from, that maybe it plays some difference.
it's interesting what you're bringing up there. When God made creation, he gave Adam 2 commands. One was to take dominion over the earth, and that was in fellowship with him. And the other was to be fruitful and multiply. Most people don't really understand what creation, what really happened with that. I'm not going to get into that, but that whole issue of being fruitful and multiply is the ability to speak things into existence. That's one of those, that's really the power of positive enforcement, that what you're doing, positive reinforcement, is you're speaking a reality into existence. And it's just an affirmation of that. When you're looking at it, and you look at the studies of plants, you speak kindly to them, you give them nice music, different things like that, and they flourish. You give them heavy metal and you're angry and all that, and they wilt. A wild thing about plants is EMF issues. You get a Himalayan pink salt lamp next to sick plants, and they recover. The ions coming off the Himalayan pink salt, it actually absorbs EMFs, which is a good thing to put around your routers, your computers, and different things like that, so you don't get bombarded with all those things.
So I grounded my rainwater in California and we didn't have a ton of rainwater. So when I didn't have the rainwater, I would supplement, but I would ground it. I would play 432 frequencies to it. And I had some plants in tents, some plants outside, but I did exactly that. I would speak to them. I would kind of flood them with positive intentions. And every time I was caring for everything, kind of reaffirm that they were being taken care of and supplemented. And it was really interesting because you could actually see the difference when you were gone for a few days or you had something that would come about, the perkiness of the plants, the reactivity of them. It's most definitely, it's how I came up with the name of that Instagram page, Stop Killing the Plants, as well. It was one of those things where I was like, oh, the vegans got it all wrong here. These are sentient just like everything else.
Hmm.
But so yeah, I've gone down that road with water, and I guess if you were giving anybody that advice going forward, they're in a city in the United States. What is your advice for drinking water, just for your best healthy approach?
Absolute best is steam distilled. Can't beat it. And it doesn't matter what marker comes up with it. It's the highest energy water. And you think about what I said about my mom. Those are the two changes. Steam distilled water, so they quit polluting her water, so she gets all the energy she needs out of it. Average is 73 to 75% water. That's our biggest building block. It's got to be clean. And so you got really three choices. You can do steam distilled. You can buy a steam distiller for about 150 bucks. Put a timer on it. It takes about 4 hours, a little less than 4 hours. If you fill them with hot water to distill 1 gallon, we always did ours into glass. If you let those dry out, you'll smoke them and create all kinds of problems. But if you get a timer, so you stop and there's just a little water in the bottom, all you got to do is dump that. It's really thick because it's got all the minerals and all the slime in it. Dump about a tablespoon of that clean vinegar in there. Leave it for 5 minutes. You just wipe it out with a scratch pad, and you're good. But if you let it smoke and burn, you got a major cleaning problem there. It's whatever. So that's number one. No matter what anybody says, you cannot beat that. Absolute rock hard science. That's hard water. Heavy water. Sorry, not hard water, but heavy
Oh,
water.
yeah.
Second one, if you're on a real low budget, the zero portrait picture is a low entry point, but those filters only last a certain period of time. You got to replace them all the time. And it depends on how dirty your water is, how long those last. The worse your incoming water supply, the less time they last. So it'd be anywhere from 2 weeks on a really, really bad source of water. 3 weeks is more common to like 6 to have to replace those. So you buy those in packs, and it doesn't matter what size zero you get. That's the cheapest way to get into it to get clean drinking water. Zero they partnered with, I forget who the big name people are that do water softener systems. Name escapes me right now, but they partnered with one of them and they upgraded the like the screw-in filters, so you can put one of those filters on your kitchen sink. You can put them in the shower, so you
Oh,
can
yeah,
use
yeah,
some
yeah.
clean water and all that. So that's one way. If you got the funds, if you just do the whole house system with Aquasana, you deal with everything. And those you have to deal with a pre-filter. It depends on how dirty that is. You got a clay well, you probably talking 6 to 8 weeks to change that pre-filter. Is granite or something doesn't create a lot of sediment, that can be 2 to 6 months.
And if you're on like city, regular
City
county water.
water, Pro just look at the filter, and that's the one thing with Aquasana. They're in a blue plastic, so you can't see through them, but you'll know once you do it. And if you're a gardener like what you are, in gardening season where you're dumping lot of water through, you pull a lot more water, and so the filters don't last nearly as long as you do in the winter when you're not necessarily watering and all that. So you got to play with that a little bit to find out what that is. But those are your three best choices. You cannot beat steam distilled. No matter what anybody says, you got people selling all kinds of high dollar water systems that don't do what they claim. They just
No,
don't.
the only issue I ran into with steam distilled was how long it took. And I had one of the big, it was like 5-gallon stovetops, and it just took forever. And I drank so much water.
Right. You generally need about an ounce for every half our weight, body weight,
So
to drink in a day.
that's another interesting one because when I'm here in South Florida, it's hot. I go, like I said before we started, for 2 hours in the morning. I'm literally engaging combat with a bunch of maniacs, and so by the time I leave there, I'm sweating profusely. I'm talking about my shirt, my rash guard, my shorts. Everything is soaked. Then I come home, I shower, I'll have a protein smoothie and maybe a light meal, and I'll go work outside for a few hours, and I will replace that shirt after a couple hours. When you're sweating
Yeah,
as much, yeah, when you're sweating as much as I am, I drink a lot of water.
you and I are the same. I sweat like a stuck pig. If I'm out doing something, you can't find a spot the size of a dime that's dry on my clothes. And it doesn't take long to do that. When I used to do hay out in the Midwest, it wasn't uncommon for me to go through 2 gallons and not pee.
Yeah.
And um, there's your measuring yard. If you're drinking a ton of water, a guy should pee typically at least 5 times a day, maybe up to 8. And if you're somewhere in that ballpark, you're probably right. But one of the biggest issues with that is when you sweat that much, you go through a lot of electrolytes. Almost all of the electrolyte replacement drinks that are out there, all your sports drinks, they don't give you the electrolytes you really need. That's not what you sweat out. It's mostly magnesium salts, and you're going to sweat out some potassium salts. Smoothies are one of the best ways to replace that. When you get into your tropical fruit smoothies, pineapple, on you
Mm.
know, things along that line. Those are the best things they do in South and Central America when people get the heat exhaustion, heat stroke. Bartender makes them a tropical fruit smoothie and bounces them back.
Yeah, I stay on it. I do the smoothies every day, and I do those salt packets as well. I pretty much I have no choice. I feel better when I do, when I overdo it almost, and when I drink a ton of water. So, man, we haven't even gotten close to covering everything your practice does and who you work with primarily.
No, not even close. But and it's always interesting to dialogue with people. I personally, and I think you do too, I enjoy organic conversations because you get to cover what comes up that's important rather than have an agenda. Somebody like me, I got a pretty deep well and I can pull out of that well pretty much anything somebody wants to talk about.
I gather that completely, and that's why that leads me to, would you be interested in doing a part 2 on this?
Yeah, we could probably do several parts. It depends on what you want to get into
Well,
because there's no way you can cover the whole of something. You got to do it in bite-sized pieces of what this is. And, we're dealing, for like Lyme disease. I started working with that as a default. I got it myself, started working with some other people that had it. No one could ever help them at all. And people just heard about it and things evolved in that way. But you look at, I call it decay of chronic because in all other chronic illnesses, typically just narrows down to a couple of things. With Lyme, it can encompass everything going wrong in the body. And we work with people that can't walk, can't talk, can't function, can't work, can't can barely make it from the bedroom to the bathroom, and we get all those people well again. So we're doing something radically different, but the same thing with hormonal issues, with infertility, autoimmune issues, brain issues. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many avenues we could go down, and I think it'd be a really good idea. Yeah, let's do another one, and we
yes,
can we can hit whatever
specific.
subject we want because we laid some foundation here that is a good springboard where you can go any way you want.
Yeah, specifically, I would see getting into gut health and to fixing your gut, and then getting into Lyme specifically. I mean, absolutely, part 2 and maybe part 3 there. Before we cut out today, your website. First of all, you have the book "Exposing Lyme and Chronic Illness." People need to go check that out. But go to your website, go to your Instagram, Health Fully You. So healthfullyu.com is the website, Healthfully You, the Instagram page.
The U is the letter U, not spelled out YOU. And
Yeah,
that's
I'll definitely put it in the show notes to make sure that that's clear. Check out Dr. Brad's ebook as well, Healing Lifestyles. But then in the comments, when we put a social post out this week, let us know what part 2 should be specifically, what we should get into first. Restoring the gut function, gut health, gut microbiome, epigenetics we were going to get into today. That in itself is probably an episode. And I think more and more people are talking about it. More people are talking about the power of belief and what we are really truly capable of, speaking things into existence you touched on. But Dr. Brad, what is your advice for those people that are struggling right now, that are about to come to your website and learn more, just in the foundation for human health and the lifestyle choices that we need to be focusing on given our circumstances and our challenges currently?
okay. I'll speak a little bit about that ebook, Healing Lifestyles. It's a bunch of epigenetic hacks that are very simple that people can use to change their genetic expression. It changes their destiny. It gives them their life back. That's at getmewell.net. It's
Say
the
that again?
easiest place. And that one's easy to remember. You can go to getmewell.net and there's buttons that'll take you to my podcast. It'll take you to the website, take you to the book. That's the simplest one because you don't have to worry about how it's spelled. That one's pretty simple. As far as what does it really take to heal? I've been working with the worst chronic nightmares for 4 decades, almost 40 years. We're tail end of that. Everybody in every industry is using generic protocols. They don't work. They cannot possibly address the unique physiological challenges going on inside of you. There's no way you can recover from chronic illness without making lifestyle changes. And that healing lifestyle book, it gives some basic, simple, foundational things you can do on your own. I get more specific in a couple of those in the book, the exposing Lyme and chronic illness. There's, I believe, 7 chapters on physiology written in a way that I've never seen before. It's in a systematic flow of physiology rather than compartmentalized. So it gives a understanding at a gradual level understanding of how all this ties together and how it all falls apart together, but it's written in a common language with stories in there. So it could be used in any doctorate program, but it's written in the language for you, your listeners, and all that. There's no high dollar words except for in quotes. I don't use any of them. Somebody I worked with in the other side of the world, and we do a lot of distant care there in Australia, and they got all the copy of my book, and I asked, what do you think? He goes, first of all, I can read it. They read almost every book they could find, and none of them are readable. Small print, great big huge paragraphs, and it's all cut and paste. Doesn't mean anything. Mine's not like that. 12 font, short paragraphs, no more than 4 sentences. In any paragraph that's not a quote, and it's a basic understanding. You'll know more than almost any doctor you ever see if you get that book. It's a huge resource, but you can't figure these things out on your own because you just don't have the tools. And if we're over 90% resolution of every other doctor's failures, what do you think we are for people who are just starting out?
Yeah.
You can save decades. And we've worked with several people who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, over 300,000 on their health with no help whatsoever. We're delivering the most care at the cheapest price pretty much in the industry with the highest results that anybody can find. And that's a value that you just can't beat.
Absolutely. Health is wealth. And unfortunately, most of the people that I respect, that I know have a inkling of an idea of what's actually going on, have been most afflicted in their lives and have had faced these challenges directly, and that's what led them to at least a ballpark of understanding. So I
And most
appreciate
of
it.
those are just doing symptomatic relief. And you look at it, there's a very big difference what most people experience. I feel better. Okay, that's symptomatic relief. It's a whole bunch different than I no longer have what I used to have. And that's the difference with what we do, with the way we work with people and most everybody else. They have less care, less diagnostics, less results. They can't tell you how long it takes. I can tell anybody how long an average takes to heal of everything going on inside. And it's not pulling things out of thin air. It's because I've been doing this so long, I know what the averages are. And I always tell people, you want to work with a doc, you ask them, what do I have? What's causing it? How do I get rid of it? How long does it take? And the last question is, how much does that cost? I'm the only doc that can answer that I've ever heard of. And the people that we've seen can answer that. That's big.
100%. It brings me to a quote that has stuck with me for a long time, and it was, before you heal somebody, ask them if they're willing to give up what made them sick.
Yeah, that's from Hippocrates.
Hippocrates. Thank you very much, Dr. Brad. We're going to line up part 2, and we'll definitely get into some more interesting stuff. This has been a fascinating conversation, and it could definitely go on for a while. But due to this show's constraints, we'll keep it here. We'll tie the knot on it today, and we'll bring people back with more answers and more dialogue. And I am thankful for your time, and thankful for your practice, and thankful for your commitment to helping people figure it out.
Thanks. Thanks for the invite.
I appreciate you. Hey, you guys
Hey,
have
you
a good
too.
day.